Morning, all. All right, so I'm starting off today talking about the Calgary Flames. The Flames today are naming Ryan Huska as their head coach, which was a rumor last week. Turns out to be accurate. And of course, Craig Conroy was hired as the new general manager. So you've got them in place. For the Calgary Flames, those are two issues that are solved, all done, no problem, right? Now, there are other things to be decided on. I know a few of these have been discussed by Craig Conroy, so apologies if any of this has been discussed. But I wanted to go through some stuff looking at their lineup, looking at their cap situation, and all that fun stuff. So, first of all, if you're Craig Conroy, I think you need to sit down with next year's UFAs before we really get into it, right? I think you need to talk to Lindholm, you need to talk to Toffoli, Backlund, Hanifin, Tanev, Zadorov. There are already rumors that Hanifin may very well end up being on the block. And you want to find out. So at the end of the season, Lindholm and Backlund both sounded like they were ready to move on. But there were rumors throughout the season that Daryl Sutter wasn't, all that popular. And that might be part of the reason why Lindholm and Backlund were saying, I don't know, about sticking around. So I think it's important to sit down and find out, do they want to stick around? Especially in the case of Lindholm. Backlund, at this point in time, I think he's 33 at this point. So, he'll be 34 at the time that contract expires. In the event that he doesn't want to come back, I think you look for somebody younger to fill that spot. And I'll talk about that in this video as well. But Lindholm, I think it's important that they keep him around. Lindholm had a bit of a down year this past season. He's still an excellent center. And so, yeah, we'll see what they do. And Toffoli had a career year. So if Tyler Toffoli wants to stick around, that's great news. In the event that he doesn't, I would think there'd be a market for Tyler Toffoli's services. So we'll see. And then there's the decision on the readiness of Dustin Wolf. So Wolf played really well for the Wranglers. I might be understating it there, right? And he doesn't look like he's going to be out of place at the National Hockey League level. Now, he's below 6 feet tall. He's 5'11". But, he's good. And we've seen with UC Saros the idea that you can't be a goaltender in the NHL if you're below 6 feet tall. In many cases, that may be accurate, but not all cases. So Wolf may very well have earned himself a job. The question then becomes, if you're Calgary, do you want to move Markstrom? Do you want to move Vladar? If you put both of them on the market, who are you going to get better offers for? I would think if they could move Markstrom's contract, they'd at least think about it. Although Markstrom could have a bounce-back season next year, that $6 million cap hit does tend to be a lot when you look at their cap situation currently. So we'll see. But that all depends on whether or not Conroy decides that Wolf is ready to be the backup next year. Maybe he decides Wolf needs another year in the AHL. And then it's a matter of trying to add up front. So you look at their offense this past season, they were 19th in goals for, right? And there may be a player or two in that top six that maybe should be on the third line, that kind of thing, right? But at any rate, do they need to add up front is a question that I think rightfully could be asked. However, the cap situation is not great for Calgary. So for them to try to add, they're going to have to shed salary or they're going to have to look to make a hockey trade. So going back to the Hanifin question, maybe Hanifin would go out, a forward comes in, maybe you save a little bit of money on said forward. But yeah, adding up front, unless, and I put it right here, unless Sutter was the issue. So if Craig Conroy looks at this roster and says, you know what? Yeah, offensively, they didn't produce enough. We were 19th in goals for last season, but we think that with a new coach behind the bench, we're going to rebound. Maybe you don't need to add anything up front. And then one question mark out there, and I know Lucic, there's already questions of whether he's going to go to Toronto or Vancouver because, of course, really, in reality, every time a player is going to free agency, there will be rumors of usually Toronto and Vancouver. That's pretty standard. There will also be Toronto, Montreal. There might be Edmonton, Calgary rumors, but it's usually Canadian teams. And I think in a large part it's because the media in certain cities, I think the assumption is out there that, well, would they try? And in Lucic's case, he is, a Vancouver hometown boy. And he said he's open to going back, but would he go back to Calgary on a cheap deal? I haven't seen anything saying that Calgary's ruled out bringing back Lucic. I haven't looked for that. I haven't seen anything saying that they wouldn't bring him back. It would kind of go against what Conroy said, though, when he was hired, right? So Conroy, when he was hired, was talking about giving young players more responsibility I had to put up here, Conroy said to do this. So like Dewar, Pelche, and others, right? And others being Coronado being brought up, that kind of thing. Connor Zary as well. And then the other problem with that is, what if you have certain young players that don't suit a bottom six role and may not be quite ready for a top six? So that's where bringing in young players ends up being, a great idea in theory, but it can be a little bit tricky because there are players that need to have that top six role, and maybe you keep them in the minors until they're ready for said top six role. Now, they do have the number 16 pick this year. We'll see with Conroy if he's one of these general managers that just says, all right, well, best player available, or if he looks at positional need. So that's one thing that I always find interesting. I, of course, favor going with just best player available. I think that's really important. Best player available, or agree with Barry Trotz, too, who said that he's told, his staff, now that he's general manager in Nashville, go for the home runs, meaning go for the guys who have the skill, guys who are kind of that boom or bust, because third and fourth liners he can add, but you're looking for that really talented player. So that says best player available. And then there's the question, too, of could Calgary end up moving down? This may end up being a dynamic draft for trades. Again, with the UFA market being kind of thin, we may see general managers using the trade route to improve their team, and maybe that number 16 pick ends up being in play. I would not be entirely surprised if it was. I think there's some good young players for Calgary to use this coming year. I think they can get right back into the playoffs, and if they can use that number 16 pick in order to help make that happen, I think they'll at least consider it. So one thing is that with them being short on cap space, you would think they'd have to trade at least a contract or two, right? Now, that's tough. With the flat cap, and, we haven't heard anything other than it's probably going to go up by $1 million this year, which does not give Calgary much space at all. They have less than $2 million in cap space, according to Cap Friendly. So they're really up against it, right? This is going to be a rough situation, and could very well lead to some trades being made. And I know that this is where the Kadri contract is going to be looked upon and frowned upon. This is where the Huberdeau extension is going to be frowned upon, at least a little bit, because Huberdeau didn't produce the way in Calgary that he did in Florida. But I will say he's one of those guys who could very well have a huge bounce back with a new coach behind the bench. As long as Huska is completely different in the way he approaches the players, I don't think Calgary should have a problem, and I think that Huberdeau should have a bounce back season, but we shall see. And the one question mark I have, because I know Flames fans are very fond of Matthew Phillips, I would think that the Calgary Wranglers, having the AHL team right there and being able to go out and watch him play, probably going to make Flames fans like him even more. With the Wranglers this year in 66 games, he had 36 goals, 40 assists for 76 points. But he's a pending unrestricted free agent, and in his career, since being drafted in 2016, he's only played 3 NHL games. So going back to what Conroy had said about playing the young players, do we see Matthew Phillips then being part of, say, the third line next year, or is he going to go to market? And if Phillips goes to market, what kind of contract would he get? Because, again, he only has 3 NHL games under his belt, and he's 25 years of age. So he's one of those wild cards where I know fans have been upset that he's not coming up and not playing enough. And so are we going to see him get that chance? At 25, is he part of that young, up-and-coming core that was being talked about by Craig Conroy? Is he part of what they're envisioning for next year's roster? Or does Phillips become a player who's on the outs because they've got Coronado, because they've got Zary, because they've got Pelche, they've already got these young players, and then maybe they decide there wouldn't be room for Phillips? But it'll be interesting to see what they do. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always, and let me know what question marks you have regarding the Calgary Flames. One thing I wanted to put on the board, but I didn't, is whether or not, are they looking to become a contender this coming season, or do you do some kind of just a reset? I don't even want to say retool. Do you do a reset? It'll be interesting to see what they do, because they were not that far out of the playoffs. They were close, which reminds me of the Iginla era. So what are they going to end up doing here? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.